Nation is following the loudest calls yet for Newt Gingrich to get out of the race and let the two frontrunners battle it out. Mitt Romney took 7 states and the most delegates last night, but he barely won in Ohio by just 1 point over Rick Santorum, despite spending 4 times as much money as his rivals in that state. And Santorum picked up victories in other big races, of course, that one being Tennessee, as well as North Dakota and Oklahoma. And with just 1 victory for Gingrich in his home state, by the way, Santorum's super PAC declared today it is time for Mr. Gingrich to step away, saying, quote, with Gingrich exiting the race, it would be a true head-to-head race. Newt has become a hindrance to a conservative alternative. Let's bring in the NewsNation political panel. Michael Smerconish is a nationally syndicated radio talk show host and contributor to NewsNation. A.B. Stoddard is associate editor and columnist for The Hill. And we have with us Steve Deace, nationally syndicated radio show host, who's still holding on to endorsing Newt Gingrich. Steve, I'll start off with you because you are the person on the panel who's actually endorsed someone. This super PAC for Santorum says it's time for your guy to get out of the race. What's your response?
If I was running Rick Santorum's super PAC, that's exactly what I would be doing. I don't think it takes a genius to come to the conclusion that if Rick Santorum was allowed to go one-on-one with Mitt Romney in Michigan and Ohio, that he would have won those states. And I think that would have dramatically changed the complexion of the race. Again, I don't think you've got to be, a mastermind politically to figure that part of this out.
Yeah, but we were talking earlier this week about the woulda, shoulda, coulda whole scenario here. In reality, though, Gingrich finished 3rd or 4th in every primary where he was on the ballot last night. Why would that be convincing to anyone that he should stay in?
Well, I think he's going to have a hard time, Tamron, making that case. I think when you have people like Richard Viguerie, who is really one of the godfathers of the modern conservative movement, issuing press releases telling Newt to step aside for the good of the country. I think when you see what they're tweeting today and what kind of things they're posting on social media and on their website, it's clear that they are now fighting for legitimacy in this race. I'm concerned as a Newt supporter. I mean, they had built up some really solid support in Kansas. They have a caucus there on Saturday. Right now, it's all about every delegate you can get. And now they're not going to go to Kansas, and they're going to focus all of their attention on Mississippi and Alabama instead, but yet these are all proportional states, so you have to compete everywhere for a delegate you possibly can. So I think the next 48 hours or so are going to be difficult for Newt to continue to make the case that he is viable in this race.
But it is, Michael, about the delegates and how you acquire them. We know the golden number, 1,044 here. That's the name of the game. It's set in place.
It is. And look, I think Steve, as a Newt Gingrich supporter, gives you a pretty blunt, candid assessment of the difficulty that his candidate will face. Mathematically speaking, I just don't see a scenario where Newt can get to that number. And with Gingrich in the race, I don't see a scenario where Santorum can get to that number. Right. I do see a path for Romney, and I think that the best that Santorum and Gingrich, both in staying in, can hope for is to deny Romney that number of delegates and hope that there's chaos at the convention.
Well, let me bring you in, AB, because, you've got Santorum's team this morning focusing in on Gingrich, but when you look at the numbers out of Ohio, Rick Santorum was leading in the average of polls, perhaps around 4 points, maybe a little greater than that. He lost that lead, and I think most people believe it is because of the answers that he was giving to questions and really his presentation, not about Newt Gingrich.
Well, no, but that's true. It's just that, Tamron, he would have won. Steve is right. He would have won if you combine the Gingrich and Santorum votes in these pivotal contests. Santorum would have won. If Gingrich had stepped aside and endorsed Rick Santorum weeks ago and had really said this is truly about stopping Mitt Romney. If it was truly about stopping Mitt Romney and not helping him, right, he would have gotten out and helped Rick Santorum. He pretends that Rick Santorum isn't a real conservative. If he's so concerned about a real conservative, he needs to choose Rick Santorum over Mitt Romney. Everybody knows that, and there's no disputing that Rick Santorum is more conservative to someone like Newt Gingrich than Mitt Romney is. So yes, Santorum has lost his leads. He's made a lot of mistakes. But I also think that even privately, Mitt Romney's team would admit to you that they could have lost Michigan and Ohio without their money edge. And that's significant. Santorum made a strong showing across a big breadth of the grassroots of the party in lots of different parts of the country these last couple weeks. He might not have a direct path to the nomination, but Gingrich has not.
Let me switch over to Mitt Romney because he should be, Michael, the headline here. But nonetheless, we're talking about the fire here that's happening with the more conservative in the party who still do not find Mitt Romney to be their credible choice. I want to play what Mitt Romney said this morning in his only post-interview. It was with CNBC, and basically, Michael, he says, I've got the money and I've got the time. Let's play it.
I'm prepared to fight all the way to become the nominee, and you know, I was pleased with our success last night. Obviously, we've got a very strong lead in delegates. We've got the time and the resources and a plan to get all the delegates, and we think that'll get done before the convention. But one thing I can tell you for sure is there's not going to be a brokered convention.
So, Michael, here you have it. That sounds good on paper, but as we played earlier with Joe Scarborough saying that Alabama, Mitt Romney, in his opinion, will lose. Mississippi, that's a loss. Louisiana, that's a loss. This is a Republican candidate who will not be strong in the South. But Steve writes in his article, listen, this is not about social conservatives versus the establishment, because if he's a rhino or not, his party will get behind him eventually if he's the nominee.
Yes and no. I think that some weaknesses were really exposed for Governor Romney, and that the fact that he can't get to 30% in any of those southern states thus far is a real problem in terms of turnout in the fall. And I would couple that, Tamron, with the observation that turnout in this primary season, despite what happened in 2010, lags behind 2008. So there's a real enthusiasm gap. And even if Mitt Romney captures the nomination, as I still think that he will, you have to question what kind of turnout is there going to be against Barack Obama in the southern base.
Steve, is that a concern for you?
Yes, I think what's happening here is there's a deeper fissure that is erupting within the Republican Party. And it started a little bit 4 years ago with Mike Huckabee challenging the establishment. And then we had TARPs and we had bailouts and crony capitalism reigning supreme. And I think what you're seeing now is flat-out class warfare in the Republican Party. This is now the crony capitalists versus the populists. Mitt Romney cannot win middle-class, suburban, Walmart, Costco, Sam's Club Republicans that are not Mormons anywhere in battleground states. And if he can't win them in Michigan and Ohio, I mean, you cannot win the presidency if you can't win Ohio as a Republican. And if he can't win them amongst the Republicans, he can't win them in a general.
Steve, we're going to talk about that a little more, but real quick here, if he's the nominee, will you be able to back Mitt Romney?
I'm going to probably need to hear the audible voice of God to back Mitt Romney.
And that doesn't
That's probably what it would take for me to do it.
I don't think that comes around very often, so I'm going to take that as a no with a little biblical backing there. Thank you very much, Steve. You actually stumped me on that one. So I was thinking the voice of God. All right. Thank you, AB. Thank you, Michael.